Huey P Long, A Fair Deal for the Veterans, delivered May 11, 1935. Ladies and gentlemen, the Congress of the United States, by an overwhelming majority in both houses, has voted to pay in full what is generally called the soldier's bonus. But what in reality is not a soldier's bonus at all, but the adjusted service wages, and very poor wages at that, which the government allowed to the soldiers for the days that they served in the World War. We have generally referred to this proposition as a soldier's bonus, but here's what it is. When the boys came back from the war in 1918 and 1919, and some as late as 1920, the government said that since all common labor had been paid from $3 to $4 per day during the war without taking any chance of being shot down or of having their legs shot off or their eyes shot out, that they would pay the soldiers for the time that they worked, fought, and risked their lives and money, the same amount per day as the commonest kind of labor was paid for the same day's work during the war. Now, since they figured that the soldier had already been paid around $30 to $40 per month while he was in the war, they deducted the $1 or $1.25 per day and gave the soldier a certificate for the balance, so that when the certificate was paid, the soldier would receive as much money from the days that he stood in the trenches as a commonest kind of laborer received for the same day as he worked. Now, I think you or I or most any other person would say that as a general rule, the man who worked and fought, who slept in the trenches on the ground, in the rain and in the mud, and who took a chance of never coming back, was entitled to get a little bit of money for that kind of service than the man who lived in comfort in his home and took no such chance of being maimed or killed. But we did not regard it that way when we gave the soldiers our certificates for service. We took the view that they were not entitled to any more money than the sorriest kind of field hand or work hand. And that is the certificate which they hold today and which is called the soldier's bonus. A few years ago, Congress provided that the soldiers could borrow about half the money that was due on the certificates. Now what we have done here is to pay them the balance, equal to the face value of the certificate issued by the government for their service. Some people talk as though the soldiers had already been paid one bonus. That is not true at all. We have not paid the soldiers the bonus once or twice or anything of the kind. What we did was to issue a certificate to each man, giving him an allowance to be paid later, and we have allowed them to borrow on his certificate up to 1/2 of the face value. But we have never paid the obligation at all. That is what we're trying to do now. Now, we proposed, and it passed to law, to pay the amount in full. The law which has been passed is known as the Patman Bill. It is the same bill that previously passed the House of Representatives. Last year, I offered this bill as an amendment to another bill in the United States Senate. It failed to pass. But in the session of Congress, the same Patman Bill was voted in the House of Representatives by an overwhelming majority. It came to the Senate and it was voted there by a very large majority. It will become the law if the president will sign it. But even though the president vetoes the bill, it will still become the law if 2/3 of the senators will vote to override the president's veto. We are very near to the mark of getting 2/3 of the Senate to vote to override the veto in the case of the vetoes. It is a shame to have a few votes doing this wrong to the men who fought our battles. That being the case, every person, whether he has or has not written to the president, should immediately write or wire to his United States Senator, asking them to vote to override the veto on the soldier's bonus bill in the case of the president vetoes the bill. We hear that the president is being urged to turn a deaf ear to the people's plea. Therefore, wire your senators. We hope that we will not be necessary. We hope that the president won't veto the bill. But for fear that he's going to do it, why are your United States senators asking them to vote to override the veto? Now the president tells us that he is a veteran of the World War II and that he understands it somewhat better than we may think. Well, it is true that Mr. Roosevelt was a very decorated veteran of the World War and an honorable veteran. He was Assistant Secretary to the Navy. He stayed up here in Pennsylvania Avenue in the daytime and in a very fine home during the nighttime. And he drew $10,000 a year for his service. And he was worth every cent of it. He was 3,000 miles away from gunfire. Of course, he had an income besides that, which made him say that he did not need that $10,000, but we paid him the $10,000 anyway. And ain't nobody trying to take that from him. And nobody says he wasn't worth the $10,000. But the man that he does not seem to have learned about is the man that did not stay on Pennsylvania Avenue and who did not stay in luxurious homes. But the man who soured and scorned the seas, who walked and slept in the rain, who stood in the mud waist deep in the trenches, who went over the top and faced the German guns, who breathed the poisonous gases, and who not only went through 14 kinds of carnage worse than the fires of hell itself, but who, when he came back, found his occupation destroyed and the job which he had held gone.